So in a remarkably speedy development, Sony just hit Sigma back, and this is really 2 weeks ago. Sigma released their 50mm f1.4. Now Sony has their own 50mm f1.4, this time a GM, a G Master. And what I do know is that this lens was rumored online for the past couple of months now, so it may come as no surprise to some of you. And in another twist of fate, Sony is only giving me a couple of days with it, and they are demanding its return. So honestly, I do have to send it back via FedEx. I need to drop it off at the FedEx office in like 2 hours. The lens design is similar to other f1.4 GM models. It's compact, relatively lightweight at just over 500 grams, a bit plasticky, but as premium as Sony makes their lenses. Starting at the rear, metal lens mount, electronic connections, rubber gasket around the mount, and this lens is dust and moisture resistant, although Sony does not guarantee 100% dust and moisture proof. Nice lens specs on top, and next to them an aperture ring that is clicky or declicked depending on the position of the switch here. There is also an iris lock switch which can lock you out or lock you into auto iris. A nice little G logo here, and on either side of it there are 2 customizable focus hold buttons, and last up is the autofocus manual focus switch. In front of that is a fully electronic manual focus ring which offers, in Sony's words, linear response, which is good. It's smooth to rotate with little resistance, and around the front there is a nice front lens element and some lens specs. 67mm filter thread and a minimum focus of 0.41 meters. Inside there are 14 elements in 11 groups, an 11 rounded blade diaphragm, and 2 of Sony's XD or Extreme Dynamic Linear Autofocus motors. The lens looks good on any camera and has a nice presence, although if you have another G Master it will look identical to that one. Now I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent and talk about some comments that I saw in my review video of the Sigma 50mm. There were some comments left and right saying that that lens is too bulky and too heavy, and this lens is certainly smaller and lighter, but you have to realize that this lens is honestly about ½ an inch shorter, and it weighs about 100 grams less than the Sigma, which isn't drastic. Maybe you'll notice it at the end of the day, maybe you won't. But I think that if you are super sensitive when it comes to weight and size for lenses, maybe some of you full frame guys need to be shooting APS-C. Maybe you guys need to be shooting with the A7C camera body instead of whatever full frame body that you're shooting. I don't know, that would make more of a difference, I think, in my eyes. And certainly you should not be using the lens hood, because if you attach this thing, you just added an extra 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches to your lens. It's not a big difference, is what I'm trying to say. Yes, this is the smallest and the lightest lens in its class because Sony is able to shrink down all the components and still make a lens that shoots f1.4 in such a compact body, but it's not drastically smaller than the Sigma. Okay, so I took this lens out with my wife the other day, and we shot a couple of portraits, a lot of portraits really, all wide open with my A7C, so let's check those out.
Oh my God, you know what I want. You know that you got me, yeah, you got my heart. Come to me and slow from me towards me, yeah. I'm following you, take me up into the sky. Take me up into the sky, the sky.
All right, let's talk about performance, and it is incredibly good. It's honestly very, very good. Probably one of the best. This lens is fantastically sharp, wide open everywhere. I mean, in the center of the frame, the mid-frame, the corners, everywhere. In Sony's own briefing, they put it up against their own 50mm f1.2, and wide open, it was sharper everywhere, especially in the corners. And fortunately, for those curious to see how it compares to the Sigma let me hold on to their 50mm f1.4 a little bit longer, so I did a full comparison between it and this lens. That video will be released in a few days. But let me just say in this video that the last two 50mm primes that I've reviewed on this channel have been two of the best lenses that I've ever reviewed in terms of sharpness and autofocus and build. Really are incredible. There are some differences and nuances between the two of them, but if you are looking for an all-around performer, you can't go wrong with this 50mm. Distortions are well controlled, the vignetting isn't an issue, chromatic aberration is subtle, still there, but subtle for an f1.4 lens. Flaring is well controlled, linear distortion is solid. It's simply a very well done lens. And the autofocus performance, as I mentioned before, is excellent. It's fast, it's quiet, it's accurate. Although in low light situations, it did struggle rarely when Janessa turned away. But this is all typical lens behavior stuff. For video work, it's a solid option. Focus breathing is a bit heavy, but if you have a camera body with the option, you can remove it with breathing compensation on this lens. When it comes down to it, there's really only one thing that I can complain about with this lens, really two or three if you look at the comparison between it and the Sigma, but the one thing is the price. This lens comes in at $12.99 US and a lot more in Canadian. Which, when you compare it to the Sony 50mm f1.2, I understand the 51.2 is a different lens, it's faster, but that lens is $2,000, so this one is $700 less. But when you compare it to the Sigma, this is $450 more. And while I wish this lens was priced a bit more competitively with the Sigma, I understand why Sony priced it the way that they did, because they didn't want to make the people who bought the 51.2 feel like maybe they overpaid a little bit for a lens with an extra half stop of light. But that's just how things work when it comes to this level of lenses. When you're talking G Master, every little bit of extra comes in at a premium. And I'm not knocking on the 50mm f1.2 G Master at all. I've played with that lens, I've never reviewed it, but it's an excellent performer. It's just not quite as sharp from what I've seen in comparison to this lens. But I think that that lens appeals to a whole different set of buyers. And for most people who are using that 51.2, I don't think that they're going to be looking at corner sharpness, to be honest with you. Now let's get back to this 50mm f1.4. It represents the best that Sony can do in terms of lens development today. It's fully featured, it's an astonishing performer across the frame, and it's compact and light like only a Sony lens can be. And there are little things that make it the obvious choice if you are shopping between it and the new Sigma. If you shoot sports or action at 10 or 20 frames per second, the dual linear motors in this lens are going to perform significantly better. I think the Sigma's motor supports speeds that are about half as fast. If you are shooting movies, this is the lens to get because focus breathing compensation is a bit of a game changer. But for casual work, if you're just using this lens to snap portraits, then you may not need all of that performance. I don't know. I'm going to wrap up my review of this lens there and say, leave your comments down below. I'm curious what you guys think of this release. Are you planning on buying one of these lenses? If you own a 51.2, how do you feel? That's a question I also have. I'll leave a link to pre-order this lens down in the description, so watch out for that. It's going to start shipping immediately, and I don't know if it's going to sell out. It might not, but if you absolutely need to get your hands on this lens and quickly, be sure to order it quickly. Thank you guys again for all of your comments, all of your likes, and your support. Stay tuned for more. Look out for that comparison video in a couple of days, and I'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.